Welcome to the Tech Valley Game Space's Game Club.
Yay!
Yay!
Today's game that was presented for this month was Spore.
Yay!
Which is by Maxis and EA, and lead designer Will Wright. My name is Alana, and I was one of the people who pre-ordered the Galactic Edition and all the expansions and stuff, so I've put a lot of hours into it. But I played it recently just to get through the beginning of the space stage. And we'll go around and introduce ourselves clockwise.
I'm Robert. I am here at Tech Valley Game Space. I started playing Spore, about a week or so ago. I'm at the end of the creature stage at the moment.
Hi, my name is Taro. I've played pretty much all the way near the end. There's 5 stages to it. There's like the cell stage, the creature stage, the tribal stage, the civilization stage, and the galactic stage. And I'm already at the galactic stage point. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Hi, I'm Astra. I played Spore until towards the beginning of Galactic Conquest era, and then I stopped.
I'm Jamie. I have read a lot about Spore in the past, and I was actually at the original GDC reveal when they were hyping it up and was very excited about it, but for some reason I never got around to actually playing it. And I still haven't really played it too much. I checked out the Creature Creator and the different editors and played around with those. I've actually messed around with those a little bit in the past as well. And then I watched Alana's Let's Play of the game.
I'm Anthony, and I have gone galactic and have made allies with Alana's empire. I've gone through the creature section twice. This time around I'm trying to collect all the parts so I can make whatever creature I want, because I like doing that.
Alright, so let me do a quick synopsis of Spore. It was it was the last game created by Will Wright, who famously created the SimCity series, The Sims, and a lot of other Sim-type games. It came after The Sims 2, which was really popular, of course. And he left EA just around the time that the expansion came out, the Galactic Adventures expansion. And he hasn't really made a game since. That was 2009.
He still claims to be making games, though.
Yeah.
He's started up the Stupid Fun Club or something, and I've never heard what they've actually done.
Nope, neither have I.
And of course, recently Maxis was kind of dissolved after the latest SimCity and Sims games had a lot of controversy. This game actually had some controversy as well because there was DRM, Digital Rights Management. For the physical copies, you had to connect online in order to kind of register. And at first, there was a limit of only 3 computers, and eventually they upped it to 5. Also, people were complaining that a pirated version had come out even before the actual release date, so all this DRM stuff was just a pain. And a lot of gamers gave the game bad reviews and pirated it just because they didn't like EA and their DRM. But the game generally received favorable reviews, although some reviewers complained about its kind of casual nature and the kind of thinness of the different stages until you get to the last stage, the space stage. So, in terms of nowadays, it's one of those franchises that never got expanded the way SimCity and The Sims did, so it kind of just died off, other than people just playing it to create goofy things. but I guess we can start talking about our own experiences playing the different stages and the different things we liked and didn't like about them. We don't necessarily have to go in order. The one stage I wanted to talk about personally was the civilization stage. So with every stage, you have three basic paths. There's kind of like the peaceful or social path. There's the aggressive path, and then there's like a middle ground path. You do kind of both, and it can be hard to stay in the middle ground because you kind of have to watch how much you're attacking or befriending and stuff like that. But the civilization stage is different because they basically stick you into a path based on how you did the tribal stage right at the beginning. So for instance, in mine, I was on the peaceful path, so I got religious. And so the only way I could change paths at that point was to conquer another city that had either military or economic. And I was looking for economic. And then I would not convert that city from what it is, and then I'd be able to use that city to sort of start building from. On my planet, I was surrounded by mostly other religious cities. I don't know if that was by design, but I think there was maybe one other military city or something. So there's very few economic cities on the whole world, and you can't access all of them right away, especially if you're landlocked, which I was at the beginning. So the game kind of forced me to play with the religious faction at that point, which up to that point I hadn't felt forced to do anything specific. And I was able to eventually get the economic victory for that stage, but it took a lot of work, and I felt like it was kind of weird how they forced me into this religious path. The religious path is basically a mirror of the military path. And I saw the economic path as more of the peaceful way of like just giving someone a bunch of money instead of attacking them with your belief system. So that was the one thing that kind of bugged me. And I'll save the glitch stuff that I kai for another time, but I wonder if anyone else had any like things about the game might have felt were kind of bad game design ideas, or maybe good stuff too.
I know that for me personally, like Alana, when I was watching your Let's Play, that was one of the things I was most curious about was, like you mentioned, that what you did in the tribal stage, which preceded the civilization stage, like affected your start and kind of forced you down a path you didn't like. And I was curious about how decisions in each individual stage, because there is this linear progression up until the end, like how decisions you make in the previous stage carry through to the next one. Because I remember, I think it was before the game came out, seeing some discussion. I don't know if it was Will Wright or somebody else on the team at Maxis, but they talked about having this kind of progression structure that they described as like a T shape. And basically like what they meant to say by that was the evolutionary stages that you're playing through are sort of like meant to not have as much sort of breadth of gameplay. Like you mentioned, they're very kind of pared down, which was by design. And then until you got to the very final like galactic stage, then there would be like this much wider breadth of gameplay where there's all these different things you can do, and it was much more kind of complex. So it was like when I heard that structure described at the time, I was very curious, like while you're kind of making your way to that final stage, like are the things that you're doing really, what are they doing to make those things feel like they matter in subsequent stages versus like, I wasn't sure if they would affect each other based on the description or if it would just be something we have to get through in order to get to the kind of more complex part at the end, like the end game stuff. So anyway, that is something that like I'm still curious about, because you were talking about some things that carry over, but that sounded like it was maybe not so enjoyable of a thing that carried over because it forced you down a particular road. But I'm curious for other people if there were like any ways that the stages related to each other that you found to be good or bad in your experience.
They weren't related at all.
It's probably a hard question to answer.
You would get each stage that you complete, you get one of 3 special powers that will carry over. So as you go through the stages, you get all these special abilities in the center of your control bar area, and depending on the way you play each stage, those powers will be different. So yeah, that's basically. And I think if you don't, I'm not sure, but I think if you don't play through the stages, if you just start at a certain stage, you don't get the special powers, but I'm not positive. Like if you don't play from the beginning, if you just pick up later on in the game, start from a later point.
Seems like that's an interesting way to sort of break it down, and like how you mentioned it, Jamie, that each and everything that you do seem to carry over. Like every little bits of things that you do carry over to the next stage, and I also feel that they were rushing us towards the later stage, like the first few stages of life seem comparatively short. If you look at, say, the civilization or tribe stage, and especially the galactic stage, I guess. I don't know if, because I think the stages that I feel most enjoyable is the early ones, where you sort of customize the evolutionary tracks of your creature. I find that idea is more appealing than everything else.
I think there's a point, like when you get to definitely in the space stage, the creation of your spaceship doesn't really affect anything. It's all cosmetic.
Yeah.
And then in the civilization stage, the buildings themselves are all cosmetic, whereas the vehicles still have this kind of power balance. But earlier on, every part you use has a certain ability or power associated with it. So you can power a game and sort of, in the beginning, you're choosing parts based on what you can afford and what kind of works gives you the most ability, maybe. But later on, it's just like gives you more freedom, and I guess it's like a little less interesting because of that, because you can just sort of build anything and nothing really matters in a sense.
Yeah. Because the way, I mean, I probably, because I did not see any trailer or hear much about it, I sort of take it that the game promotes mostly on the earlier stage of life, where you could sort of customize a creature and make it evolve in such a way that is that has a lot of options that basically have limitless sort of possibilities. But I guess I was wrong, because they stuffed a lot of different systems past the evolutionary stage, which I guess brings back to the criticism of the game, where you have different kind of systems that is quite shallow. So
I did feel like Spore was a kind of game where it tried to do everything and did all of them on a very average, boring level.
Yeah.
To be completely honest. Especially to me, I didn't particularly care for the character creation. I was trying to play the most minimal customization possible. And it's like, oh, if I need some sort of ability, I'll just slap it at some place and I'll call it a day. So I didn't care for what my creature looked like. I didn't particularly care for have a particular attachment towards anything I've created throughout the entire game. So I personally found those portions of the game to be a complete waste of time. And after that, I just looked at largely what are the systems in the game doing, and didn't particularly find them that interesting for each and every stage. it's worth noting that each and every stage plays like a completely different game. You have the civilization stage where it's like a real-time strategy.
Almost.
There's a game called Agar.io, I believe, which is pretty much the cell stage era, and the Keith said it best. The creature stage, right after the cell stage, is kind of like, World of Warcraft-ish.
Yeah,
Very
I believe,
MMORPG.
I believe the developers at Maxis were very open about that as well, about having like one particular reference point for each of the stages, at least before Galactic, where each one had a particular game that they were kind of consciously trying to do a pared down version of. I don't remember. I was actually trying to look up just a bit earlier, like what those specific reference points were. But I suppose for people who played through it in a little more depth, it might be a little more obvious.
There's also the fact that obviously customization becomes less and less important as you go further into the game. They start restricting your decisions after that. And I guess some of it is supposed to make you feel like, oh, you have to commit to your decisions, but I didn't care for customization at all, so I'm like, just get to me the next spot already.
Yeah, it feels like customizations that you do earlier in the game doesn't really matter the next stage when you advance to the next stage, because it's no, I take it back. It seems to matter a lot more in the earlier stages.
Yeah, I think if you look at from cell stage to creature stage,
right,
the parts that they give you, the ones that work in the water are basically useless, except for your mouth maybe and the feet. So you don't really have to, I mean the eyes work too, but you don't really have to use any of those parts. You're kind of encouraged just to get rid of them and use the new parts that you find.
Right, yeah.
So I also think it would have benefited from having more of a sense of evolving from what you had before and those things still having some use.
Right.
And when you go from creature stage to tribal stage, the power of your creature still matters because you're still walking around. You can still attack. Like if you don't use any other weapons, you can still use a regular just attack, or still have some of those options, but it tends to focus more on the tools. So a lot of the stuff you built into your creature in terms of its physical attributes don't necessarily matter as much, but they're still there. And then by the time you get to, and that's when, like, you can't really go back, sort of. Like, once you go into the tribal stage, your creature stops evolving.
Yeah.
Its physical form is kind of set, and then you're just changing its clothes. So, and the same thing when you, well, I think you can customize the clothes even in the space stage, but there's really no reason to, once you like design buildings or things or vehicles, to go back and edit them, because like the special abilities for the vehicles in the civilization stage don't really matter as much once you are in the space stage, because you're not trying to convert cities with them anymore, so they're just basically there to represent them moving around. It doesn't really matter as far as I know their abilities. They just kind of live there. Placeholders. So, I mean, I think it's great. Personally, I love seeing all my old creations, because when I start playing this game again, like everything I've created since the beginning just started popping up in my universe. Even the stuff I created during the demos. But at the same time, for me, I like the creation aspect of it. But in terms of stuff carrying over, it doesn't always matter so much. It's more just the recognition and the coolness of the stuff you create, I guess, than the actual abilities.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten completely that there was any aspect of the pieces that you use in any of the creators being functional, like you said, in the creature creator specifically. So that was, I had it in mind. Because as I said, when I remember very vividly like seeing the original kind of unveiling that they did of this great fanfare at Game Developers Conference, and I just remember there was a ton of excitement. Like that's all anybody was talking about after it, and there were particular aspects that they showed that I think, may or may have not have kind of survived to the final version. But one in particular was they showed the kind of creature creator, and it's clear they lavished a lot of attention onto that part of the customization, like just making, this editor that could support this huge variety of very odd types of creatures and make them all be able to walk around and stuff. So I remember personally being excited about that aspect, because I played games before that had not necessarily editors that were quite that good, but kind of comparable. Like there's a game, Graffiti Kingdom, which had like a really nice kind of just create your own
the
creature
game
out of
that we have
parts.
on our shelf.
Yeah. But like in any case where I played a game with a really good editor prior to Spore, it didn't feel like it all felt cosmetic, right? So I had this idea for some reason. This might have been my own misinterpretation at the time, but I remember talking to people who had maybe that same misinterpretation that like, oh, this is one where like you'll be able to customize it and it's going to completely change like the gameplay. Like the way this creature moves around is going to be totally different. You're going to have to control it completely different. So that might have been intentionally or not like a kind of misconception that was around at the time. So I then had this memory of it that turned out to be completely not the case, that it was all cosmetic. So just to find that there was some element that was functional in the creature stage, going back and playing it was actually a surprise because I had forgotten entirely about that. So yeah, it's interesting that even that bit then kind of falls away, as you mentioned, Alana, like at the later stages. I wonder if that was like intentional or just a matter of kind of, it does serve the function of being less restrictive then, because you can just create whatever you want. But Alana, as you mentioned, like then in some cases, if you're looking for like a functional component to it, your choices can feel meaningless. Because I'm personally less excited about the cosmetic side of creation. Like I was intrigued by the functional side, and I felt like there wasn't as much of that in the final game.
I have actually played around with a lot of functional related stuff because that's my mode of operation, to see if I can break the game in any way, fashion, or form. Taking eyeballs out entirely does make everything except for the landscape invisible, which is nice. Taking away legs does make your creature crawl and make you incredibly slow, so that's also nice. There is flight.
Yes. And the height also matters a tiny bit.
Yeah, a tiny bit. What else was there? Taking away the mouth does indeed leave you to starving or painfully slow and painful death. That one's fascinating.
Yeah.
I have actually bothered to do that. That's why I died at least 34 times. I think 37 times was the last count. Or 40, I don't remember. So, yeah, yes. Technically, like, they do have these minor aspects where you're compelled to have it, otherwise the rest of the game becomes nigh impossible. Most noticeably, they'll tell you between the creature and the tribal stage that if you don't have arms, you're going to be screwed. So I wasn't quite brave enough to take away the arms and see what would happen, but I do have another save, so I might as well give that a shot next time.
Yeah,
that's the thing that interests me.
In the tribal stage, they do need to use tools usually to succeed. But you could still, like I said, use your basic attacks. If you don't have arms, you don't have to use weapons. But the other creatures might have weapons potentially. Depends on how far the other civilization or the other tribes advanced.
I wonder if the rest of the game is completely playable with eyeballs taken out. Is it like you can't see anything throughout the entire game after that? I think it's worth experimenting.
See, that's the thing I like about the game, is the early stage seems to have a lot more possibilities for experimentations versus the later stage where you basically, I guess the civilization and galactic conquest stage, where you basically just have to do fetch quests. At least in my experience.
Ironically, my experience was exactly the opposite. I didn't care for the customization in the beginning of the game, and I actually started caring towards the end of it because of the multiple possibilities that there are. So I found experimentation to be far more interesting towards the end of the game.
Okay.
What were your experiments at the end of the game?
What colony sells what spices at what price? If there's any price variations between what's being sold, what would happen if I terraform certain planets? Would I be able to terraform particular planets that already has creatures on it? The answer is sort of to that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The game's a little mean like that.
So I guess you're more interested in the sort of economy of things.
Yeah, the end game is pretty open ended. It's not as directed. They give you a kind of present. I don't know. There's some person on your home planet who can give you missions.
Yeah.
And you can just ignore them and do whatever you want. But they'll give you the list of all the different things you can do in sort of these hierarchical groups. Like you say, I want to expand our empire, and then they give you different choices. And as you complete those missions, they get kind of eliminated from that tree of options. But you can always just go off into the universe and kind of do your own, meeting other civilizations. But the thing is, I guess the advantage of going home is you already have this base where they're giving you free repairs, free energy, they're giving you free spice, like every place that you produce spice from will give you that for free, so you can trade that. You can even trade it right back to the same person who gave it to you. So you get the spice and you sell it to them for money.
Yeah, that's a little bizarre, but it works.
Yeah, I think the easiest path is to do stuff in your home area and then expand from there. But if you just stick around your home area too long, it does get kind of repetitive. I had one instance where I think I did the same mission twice for the same moon because they're so... I had a moon colony where there's like no terraforming, the planet was dead. So they kept kind of asking for the same thing, like bring us a sample of this or something. It was like the same planet. But other than that, I mean, the more advanced civilizations probably have more things that you can do for them.
I find that kind of the same because I explored a little bit out of the, I guess, star system of your home base, home planet. And then when I met other civilizations, they basically asked me, could you do that for me? Could you go to that planet and fetch something for me? And then I went to that planet, obviously the solar system around it, met another civilization that asked me the same thing to another planet. So I went, this will be a series of fetch quests. I am going to stop.
That used to be like a really common complaint amongst journalists. It seems like I'm at a point where I don't even do that anymore. I don't bother fetch questing.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
I think it's one of the potential limitations is, well, when you interact with these other civilizations in the space stage, you can just trade them, money and stuff for items, which is okay. That's always an option.
Yeah.
You can do diplomacy, which has a few options. But in terms of missions, each civilization, I think, can only give you like one mission at a time, or sometimes they don't have any missions. Or it's each planet. So they can all give you a separate mission, but they only have one mission for you at a time. So there's not like a list of things for you to choose from. If you go somewhere and they say fetch us a plan or something, then you just have to go somewhere else if you don't want to do that. Because that's all they're going to ask you for at that time. So.
I guess there's also my issue about there's too many names and places to find and decipher.
I think there's 100,000 stars and 500,000 planets in the game. So, I mean, nobody's going to see all of them, but even just trying to find the right one can be a little difficult at times.
Yeah, I often, when I encounter a game that feels like it kind of uses that as an advertising point of like this infinite universe and stuff, and so it's totally open-ended sandbox, so many possibilities. That's when I start to get a little frightened. Actually, like
it's not even frightened so much as you can tell that if it's like that, then there can be only one of two possibilities. There's going to be a ton of copy and paste, or they legitimately spent the time to try to generate something that's fleshed out, and usually it's always the former.
I think for some people, I mean, exploring something, that vast is like a really compelling call to adventure for them. Like even just if it's just like exploration, like I know, types of players who are really into that. Just for me, it's really daunting for some reason. Probably because I grew up playing much more linear games or whatever. So when I first played something like even just like Morrowind or something, it was like a total like, wow, this is almost too much for me to process right now. Just the amount of options. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting, particularly Alana, when I was watching you play the Galactic section. I was thinking of No Man's Sky as well, actually, because my first question when I saw No Man's Sky and continue to see it, like it looks really cool. They're advertising it in that same way of like procedural universe that you can explore. But my question always is like, then what can I do? Like for some reason, like just going and seeing all the different planets, like
I mean, it seemed like the only thing that they had interesting on that trailer was base combat, and that was about it. So it's like
that seems like only one part of it, though.
Yeah, that's the problem. They haven't shown any other part of it, so that's where I'm left to assume.
Yes.
Yeah. So in comparison, when I was watching you play the Galactic section of Spore, like it seemed like there was a fair amount to do, like with all the different aspects of terraforming and stuff. So I thought that was like a cool hook.
Yeah.
And I remember that was another thing they showed at this kind of demo where they were really trying to sell the game, and there were a lot of people who were really into that idea too, of like being able to just completely like spread throughout the galaxy and really like affect, the habitability of all these different planets and the kind of ecosystem on a wide scale and stuff. So I compared to like other approaches to like a procedural universe, like that seems like a pretty good approach to me, but I didn't play it for a long period of time, so it's interesting to hear the contrast of it sounds like for some people it was like your favorite section, and for others you just got really bored.
It's pretty slow, I think.
It is, yeah.
It's the largest chunk of time of the game in terms of how long it takes to get through it, and it's the most open-ended because you're not stuck on that one planet. You can pretty much go on forever doing all this stuff. So I mean, I really like the idea of making colonies and terraforming planets to make them habitable and stuff, but it does take a long time to get to the point where you can do that proficiently, because right at the beginning you don't have much money, and you can do one planet just to a basic level, but it takes a while to be able to get the powers to be able to just terraform planets at will with like freedom.
Terraforming was easily my least favorite part of Galactic portion. I just don't care to customize things.
That's my favorite. The customization. The customization makes the game.
Yeah.
It's really, it's the point of playing Spore, I think.
The fun of the game is the head canon you create with the things you make in it. That's what I get out of it.
Yeah, I think when I got to know about, hey, you can terraform a planet, I would like to do that. But dang, it's so expensive.
Yeah. Gotta trade that spice.
Trading spice doesn't give you that much, though. You have to like trade.
Oh, it gives you a lot. It gives you a lot.
I probably didn't get the correct place to trade because I didn't get that much.
You gotta shop around. You can't just sell it to the first person you see. You
I went fairly far away, and I got something like few hundred whatever currency they have.
I wonder if
because you can hoard. I think you can hoard a lot of spice on your ships.
Yeah.
99.
There's basically just different colors.
If you're allied with someone, is the prices
it's better.
Yeah.
If they like you, they'll give you better prices.
Right. Yeah. I see.
They do?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, so my galaxy is you're either friends with me or you hate me. One of the two. So I'd never seen the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly actually for buying like stuff that they're selling. They probably change the price. In terms of buying spice, I think it depends on how much they want it, based on whatever invisible needs. I was just going to say about the spice trade, I remember a game called Gazillionaire, where you take a spaceship. It's a 2D game, like an economic game, and you just trade stuff between places. And that game had a lot of interesting things about supply and demand and such. And I feel like if they added more of that into Spore, like a better like description of where people need things and like made it more visible or made it deeper, like trading vehicles, I don't know, whatever, just expand on the economic stuff that could have made it, to me, more interesting, because I really enjoyed games like Gazillionaire where you're just going between planets trying to trade resources. But the spice thing seems a little shallow again. It wasn't fleshed out, or maybe the whole game was like, it was kind of already delayed, so maybe they kind of rushed through the filling out of the game just to make it complete.
So, to slightly change the subject a bit, what were your guys' favorite stage and least favorite stage in the game? I guess we'll go in order for the heck of it, considering how far you played. So, as everyone knows, the Galactic stage was my favorite of it, and the rest is kind of a wash in my memory. I think I did not like the city stage.
City?
Civilization.
Oh, city, yeah.
Either the civilization or the cell stage where I died like 12 times. So both of those I didn't like in equal measures.
Well, I didn't like the civilization stage again because I feel like they kind of forced you to play a certain way and made it difficult to change when it's like, it's a civilization, it's not like you're changing body parts around, you can just decide to do something different, I guess. But it also, I mean, I think the gameplay levels did get more complex as it went, so like I enjoy the possibilities of the space stage, but it's kind of hard for me to choose because I like to create more, so I've created a lot of creatures in the creature creator, and I haven't really created as many like vehicles or spaceships and stuff because, again, I feel like the choices you make in the creature creator matter, whereas in the other ones it's not quite as important. So it's kind of hard for me to choose between the creature stage itself. I feel plays kind of uninteresting. It's not really distinguishable, but I enjoy making the creatures. Whereas the space stage is obviously where like the most options are in terms of freedom. So I like the space stage the best, but I like the creature creator the best as far as the creator knows. I guess I'd split it that way.
The tribal stage and the civilization stage are my least favorite. I kind of like customizing the buildings. I like customizing most anything, and I like that it lets you write like a description for it, so you can come up with stories about what they are and what they do and where they come from and all that. And yeah, I wish the creature stage was let you act more like an animal. I recently got Shelter, but I haven't played it yet, so hopefully act like an animal in that.
May I suggest Tokyo Jungle? So everyone wants to act like an animal.
Yeah. I have played that. That's good. I do like the space stage, and I watched like a 5-minute thing for No Man's Sky, and I thought, oh, this is Spore. I wonder why everyone loves this, but not Spore.
Everybody loved the idea of Spore as well. So
yeah.
Hopefully they'll love the actuality of No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
Wait, I mean,
Clearly I'm the exception.
As far as people who knew about the game or has some preconception about what the game is going to be, what were they, like from your experience, what were they hoping?
For Spore?
Yeah.
So here are the selling points that I remember people talking about for Spore. Like this was what I felt like people's understanding of was the game before it came out. One of the big selling points was like sim everything. So like now Will Wright's he's done, The Sims and SimCity, and now he's gonna do sim everything. So, and he kind of had described that, or the marketing department at EA or whoever it was had described it as like go from, the smallest single-celled organism to like colonizing the galaxy and like everything in between. and like basically the whole idea of like that progression being something where like your decisions at every stage of that would like impact this ongoing evolution of like, you know, from the smallest to the largest thing. So that was kind of one aspect that I think got people really excited. So that's where, again, the kind of this sort of T structure that they came up with, when I saw what that actually was, like my take on it was like, oh, they kind of had that as a selling point, but they were clearly more interested, it seemed like, in a couple of these stages than others, where a few of them seemed kind of like cursory, like they were in there just to say like, okay, this is clearly like an evolutionary step that we need to acknowledge.
Right.
But we don't want players spending too much time there. We're not gonna lavish quite as much attention. That was my take. So that was one bit. The creature creator was a big selling point. They spent a lot of time showing that, which as I mentioned, they kind of talked about how you can create all these different things and the game will just handle it. And this incredible variety of creatures that you can make. They also then tied that in with the online component, which I think was really smart about, like, your friends will make cool, crazy creatures too, and then that will populate your galaxy. So they sold it as like massively single player, or was like the term they came up with. So people were excited about that, which I think they really delivered on that aspect of it. Like, I think that was really cool and successful. So there were those bits, and then just the last kind of Galactic Conquest section. Like, I remember a lot of info about that and about like just the terraforming, and like, you know, they talked about, I think for contrast, like I remember hearing a lot about the largest scale section in the Galactic, and also like the very beginning parts, and to some extent the cell stage. But I think they kind of knew that the creature stage was like a little bit more interesting maybe, right. And there was more there, so they talked about that a lot. So anyway, those are the things that I remember like being a focus in the marketing. And as far as the parts of the game that intrigued me the most, even just watching like Alana's playthrough, I think probably because of that, like those were the sections that I was the most intrigued by. And I thought those were kind of the coolest sections as well to watch and to kind of see the design of. The creature creator to me still is like an incredibly impressive thing. Even if then like what you do with your creature maybe feels like it doesn't take as much advantage of that as it could. Like, yes, there are functional pieces, but then the tasks you're having to perform seem a little bit, I just saw a lot of like making your creature dance around, basically, and stuff, which is cool. It's funny to see all the different creatures dance and stuff. Those are like the bits I remember. As far as what people were then, I remember them being disappointed by after it was released, as opposed to what they were expecting. I really remember a lot of information circulating about. This was where, so there's a developer who worked on Spore called Chris Hecker.
Yes.
Some of you might know. He's now working on an indie game called Spy Party. Yep. And he's a very, very intelligent and outspoken programmer. And he was one of the people who worked on the creature creator, among other things. But because he's outspoken, he would sometimes give like interviews and stuff. And he was one of the public-facing people on the team for Spore. And he got into some hot water with some gamers where I believe it was him. I apologize if I'm misattributing this, but it was Chris Hecker or somebody on the Spore team had did an interview where they talked about how there were these internal debates at Maxis where they kind of had two camps of people on the development team, and they described it as the cute camp and the science camp. And my understanding of that, my memory of that description was the science camp, and I think this is how a lot of gamers interpreted this, whether or not it was true, was like science camp was pushing for more kind of hardcore like simulation, like more science-based, like, you know, complex sim gameplay or whatever. And then the other one was kind of pushing more towards the kind of simplified, pared down gameplay, which was again like a source of a lot of people's criticism, was just how pared down some of the stages were. And so, like, I think there were a lot of people whoever it was who gave that interview, I remember it being Chris Hecker, and a lot of people being mad at him for some reason, just because he happened to have mentioned it in this interview, and then they attributed all these decisions to him. But he or whoever gave this interview was saying they were in the cute camp. And so that got a lot of people mad, saying like, oh, this person, like, they watered down Spore. It wasn't like what we wanted. We wanted it to be like a much more complex sim. And so there was some backlash from some contingent of players about that. And probably some reviewers as well.
What I remember when news started to first trickle out about Spore was the idea that, you know, you would start off evolving on your own little planet, And then eventually, once you've gotten to the galactic stage, you could take off and you could visit your friends' planets.
Yep.
And you could play with your friend on their planets. And then when the game came out, people found out you can't actually play with your friend on their planet. You just happen to visit planets that might be inhabited by monsters who look like your friend's creations. And people were disappointed about that.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, I wonder if that isn't why they kind of, at some point, coined this massively single-player term to really try to emphasize to people, like, single-player. Like, no. Because, yeah, I think there was a bit of that misconception.
I have heard of Sim Everything's part, and people were disappointed about how it was only Sim at one part, kind of thing.
Wasn't even Sim at one. Wait, which part of
They're talking about the creature stage.
Oh,
The only, there was criticism that it didn't simulate reality well, because the only parts that really resemble reality was the structure of the galaxy, and also the fact that the way creatures socialize was done in a reasonable way. But I think, and there was also at one point more stages to the game, including like a underwater stage before the creature stage, where you'd be a larger underwater creature. I think a lot of stuff did get cut out because of complexity, and they wanted to make the game fun and more accessible to more people. So I was reading a quote on the Wikipedia page by Will Wright. I think he said there's something like both half. He was mentioning like Half-Life or something. He was saying how both Half-Life and The Sims were highly sold a lot and were highly ranked, but maybe Half-Life was sold less well and was higher ranked by critics because of its, but it's probably a less accessible game than The Sims. So I think he's trying to make games that are a little easier to play for. So yeah, the Q camp probably did win a lot of the times, and that's why the game is not an evolution simulator. It's not a religious simulator either. It's kind of just a game about creating stuff, and more of a game than a sim per se. So it's not like other simulators you might buy where you're trying to emulate real life to a great degree.
Yeah, I remember there being some expectation among particularly people I knew who were teachers, that they were excited about the game because they thought it would be a great tool for teaching about, and I believe the main thing people were expecting was you're going to be able to teach about like evolution in classes with this game for some reason, and then
that was bizarre. I have heard of that, and that was really bizarre from my opinion, because it's like you're customizing it. That's not evolution at all.
Yeah, I actually have, since I bought the Galactic Edition, it comes with DVDs for like behind the scenes and like documentaries, and one of them was from the National Geographic Channel, just talking about actual evolution, and then they showed parts of the game and how they kind of realized, even in this documentary, that this was not how evolution works. But it's similar to evolution in some ways, but it doesn't use any of the real mechanics. So it's kind of like everything is just similar to stuff, but unlike a game like Kerbal Space Program, which I love, where they're trying to emulate actual physics, and it's very difficult. Like a lot of people struggle just to make something that works. Spore takes the opposite approach of let's not make anyone worry about anything scientific. Let's just make it a game of it, basically.
Yeah, they definitely took great pains with just looking at the creature creator to make sure basically everything you do you'll still kind of be able to play, with maybe the exception of starving and other things like that. But yeah.
Like the different types of mouths might have different abilities, but
yeah.
None is necessarily better. Well, there are better things that cost more points, DNA points. But, I mean, you don't really have to make the best creature to win. You just have to get to the next stage, basically. It's still an RPG in some ways of gaining experience, fulfilling quests. It's still very gamey, more than it is sim everything. Like sim everything makes it sound like more of a hardcore simulation than it really is. It's more like create anything visually. You can visually create a lot of stuff, but you can't really simulate a lot of stuff necessarily. Whereas I think the terraforming, one of the reasons I like that is it seems to have more of a simulation-based thing, kind of trying to bring a little more science into it. Maybe the economic game with trading and stuff.
If you don't mind me asking this question again, I believe Astra and Robert hasn't answered what their favorite stage and least favorite was. I'm just curious.
Favorite stage? Probably the cell and creature stage. A little bit on the tribal stage. I don't really have a least favorite stage, but I don't really like the galactic stage, but that's not because let me rephrase that, because I find it too complex and too open world.
Mm-hmm.
I have the same problem with Jamie in the sense that if you suddenly throw me into an open world after conquering a galaxy, after conquering a planet, I wouldn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if I look at it as a sort of a system, I find it fascinating. So it's actually not my least favorite by that sense. So I don't have any least favorite.
Mm-hmm. Robert?
Well, I only played the first two stages, which is the cell stage and the creature stage. And it's hard to really narrow down exactly which one I liked better because gameplay-wise, I think I liked the cell stage better because it was more like the game flow. You just could relax and swim around and eat, little pieces of monster or plant or whatnot. And it was more of a puzzle game. But it was incredibly short. And you didn't really get to enjoy it very long before you're pretty much forced to move on to the next stage of evolution. But then the creature stage, whereas you got a little bit more in depth, it was incredibly repetitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, all I did was I spent literally probably about 9 hours singing, dancing, and shaking my butt at other creatures.
Yeah.
And that was really the only thing that happened until they eventually said, okay, you can evolve now to the tribal stage.
Not to mention dying 20 more times like I did.
You could also consume other creatures if you are carnivores.
Well, I was an omnivore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I pretty much ate the plants because I didn't want to fight anybody. I just wanted to make as many allies as I possibly could. And I think there was only one species who disliked me to the point where I couldn't change their mind, and my pack killed them for me. I didn't even have to initiate attack. I just didn't have to worry about it. My pack killed them for me. But, I mean, literally, most of my game was just being frustrated, actually. Why, no matter how good I dance or sing for these people, I can have 5 in all the stats. It just wasn't enough to make a connection.
I think it was a matching game, so if you see them do a certain type of move, you have to mimic it.
Right.
So if you do the wrong one, they wouldn't like it.
Well, it wasn't until maybe 7 or 8 hours past that I realized that if I have a pack following behind me, that actually makes it the dancing and singing and all that stronger. Mm-hmm. So that was what I needed to push myself to make that connection.
Yeah, I think that's carried over in the tribal stage where you can bring a bunch of people with different instruments, basically.
Yeah.
And then they request certain notes, and you have to play those ones.
If memory serves correct, Robert, when we were discussing about this, you said that you're a completionist, so your play method probably contributed to the repetition of the creature stage.
Right. I wanted to make sure that I collected every possible body part so that when I move on to the tribal stage, I had the coolest looking monster I could make. And I actually succeeded in collecting the last bits and pieces last night. But I decided I was going to go the distance and make every single creature on my map my friend. So I'm still in the process of charming the rest of my creatures before moving.
Did you were you able to get there are different stages of I guess diplomacy or friendliness from other tribes? Were you able to get tribes that are basically angry at you and hate you to sort of calm them?
The red ones, no.
Yeah,
if they were the ones that hate you, they hate you for life.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Some creatures, depending on how people play them, will just be aggressive no matter what.
Right.
They're they have no social body parts, and if somebody played them to be aggressive and violent, then that's probably what they're going to do in the game.
And I only had the one that was like that to me, and my pack killed him for me.
I also find it interesting that there are some random gigantic dragons that I encountered. I was like, wow, how did that come to be?
Yeah, there's epic creatures.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see a spaceship fly by in the earlier stages, and they'll abduct your pets and stuff.
Yeah.
I really liked that when I saw that happen because I had no idea. But I think that happens in your Let's Play at one point. I like that hinting at like the larger
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Can your creatures become epic
Well,
or player-made
yeah.
creatures? Yeah.
I've even think in my own game I found like lower versions of my own creatures. Like I'd see a low version of my current creature on a different planet somewhere.
Mm.
And I think any creature can become an epic creature.
Yeah, as Alana and I just discovered, your cell stage creatures can become an epic for no reason whatsoever.
I think it was one that had just evolved to land and nobody put legs on it or something.
No, that was...
So it was floating around. But...
No, that was my cell stage character. I know that for a fact. And I know like the other one that I just saw earlier was also a cell stage character that should be in the water but is on land for some reason. So...
Yeah.
I also had a game crash on me, so who knows? Maybe I messed up the game enough that it will do weird things.
This is a vaguely related question, but does anybody have any stories about like the funniest creature that they either created or encountered at any point?
I made a lot of weird creatures over my time. One was called the paperclip, and it was super small, like you were saying, the smallest creature possible, and it had one spinal point. And the rest of it was one long arm with a head at the end of it. So it actually, with that small spine, which is the base of your creature, it's always a spinal creature. And then I just wrapped an arm around like 8 times and put a head on the end. And whenever you see this creature in the game, I think I made it during the demo too, so it's kind of busted, but whenever it actually appears in the game and moves around, its limbs just sort of glitch out, and you can see these like long pink pixelated, or like these polygons are basically just stretched like they were in some busted Unity game that you made. They start glitching out.
The unconventional stick swinging simulator.
Yeah, so the paperclip monster I made glitches out whenever it actually does anything. And there was actually an epic one on one of my planets like that. That was during the civilization phase, so I said I'm going to kill this before it like attacks my city, because the epic things will shoot fire out of their mouth and stuff. So I went up to it with my religious vehicles, because that's all I had access to at the time. And I went to attack it, and instead we all shot it with like the musical religious stuff, and it started dancing and stuff. So I ended up befriending it instead of killing it.
That part of it, that sort of trying to convert civilization in that way is just funny.
My first character creation, on land character creation, was, oh, you can change this number of spines, and I shrunk it, and then it joined both eyeballs into a single point. And that was fascinating because it kept blinking in the most bizarre and creepiest way possible. Also, I never replaced a mouth, so the food will just appear in front and then disappear. It's like there's no animation, it just disappears. And that was it. That was the time when I died about 20 times.
Yeah, it seems like you set yourself up for hardship.
I made a species of ants that can shoot acid. And when I gave them arms, I put punching daggers on their arms.
Wicked.
Pretty cool. You didn't ask What's the coolest creature you've
Sorry.
seen? I think mine is.
No bias.
No.
I did create a vertical worm that has a mouse's mouth, and then I forgot to save, so that was all gone and disappeared.
That's how so many species become extinct.
I actually wanted to mention this at some point, so now I'm like taking time. I do think there are some basic gameplay problems with it, like you mentioned, crashing. I've experienced some crashing, but in terms of the save situation, so the game doesn't seem to auto-save. It will save if you go back to the main menu. But otherwise, you can play through the entire game and it will never save anything. So it does try to warn you, like, are you sure you want to go back? You haven't saved yet. But I don't think when it warns you, it actually, like, it should give you an option right there to say, we can save your game, rather than say, no, it's okay, I'll quit to the main menu. But
It has never prompted me to save.
the other thing that happened to me was the first time I played through this civilization stage, I was going into the space stage. I wanted to stop because it was a long playthrough at that point. I was in a tutorial section for the space stage, which is actually a very long tutorial where they make you go from planet to planet. So I was like, I started that and I was like, okay, I need to stop because I'm going to get too far into the space stage. I found out it looks like you can't actually save during these tutorials. So when I quit, I was like, oh, there's no save option, so I guess I already saved. So I ended up playing through the civilization stage twice more, because the second time I played through, again, I was in the space tutorial, and I tried doing the thing. You have an optional thing where you can fly around your cities. I tried doing that, and then it's supposed to pop up the communicator. Click on the communicator to complete the quest.
Oh yeah.
So it was flashing, and I went to click on it, and nothing was happening. So I was basically stuck again. And I had to go back and replay the civilization stage again. And this time I made sure I saved the game before I progressed to the space stage. And so the whole game save situation was kind of an annoying factor.
Yeah.
I had that glitch. I had the same glitch.
Yeah.
What did I do to it? I think.
Wait, in regards to it not allowing you to save?
No, there was a tutorial stage where you basically emerged from the conquering the world stage, and you just got your spaceship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole tutorial sequence prompted you to go to a planet, come back with some resources, and you're supposed to click on the communicator to say, "Oh, I'm back. Here's those things that you request, blah blah blah." But when I click it didn't happen. Nothing happened. I think I tried going back to the main menu. I was able to continue it before that particular quest. Probably because I saved or something.
Yeah, if you reverted, there is that glitch where the communicator just won't open and you're just stuck. You have to reload.
Yep.
It's interesting to talk about some of these topics of problems with Spore in modern context of Maxis being closed down, and at least the last game that I remember them releasing being the SimCity update, which feels like it had some problems that are related in some ways. Like it didn't have DRM, but it had the online only aspect, right? Which was
didn't have offline.
Yeah. So, and the servers were fairly broken, was my memory at the beginning. So,
Oh yeah.
They seem to have this unfortunate trend, at least from Spore to that SimCity game, of making these very cool, interesting games, and then having some problems with just basic playability issues that then kind of deplete a bit of the goodwill that people would otherwise have toward it to really get into the game. Because I think you really have to you have to have some amount of patience to get into a sim game like this. Mm-hmm. And if there are just issues that make you feel impatient, then it's tough. So it's kind of a shame.
I think
but
Robert said it best. pretty much the entire game I felt was repetitive. Even under, getting nearly 40 deaths in the game, that was thrilling in some ways, but numbifying and repetitive in other ways. There's no penalty for dying. You just teleport back to your location with all your progress and resources still saved. So it's like, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, your
Should have died more often.
Your time is at stake.
Yeah.
So I just thought this was really repetitive. This was I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again throughout the majority of the game. It's only when the galactic portion of it came in that there was a significant element that I thought was interesting in exploring, and was kind of the first time where I saw completely different aspects of the game: the terraforming, the economic trade system, the exploration aspect of things, just discovering a few things, communicating and trying to ally or make enemies with other civilizations. Those actually all connected to each other in this really fascinating network of systems where I thought something actually interesting was going on, but it just felt like a little, too little, too late at the end, and I was kind of tired with the game at that point.
Seems like, as other people have mentioned, a lot of the emphasis for where the source of variety in the game was around the user generated creation aspects, creating your own creatures and stuff. And that, yeah, so if that aspect isn't for players who that doesn't appeal to,
yeah,
it fits then in a context of kind of fairly repetitive gameplay. It can be a tough sell, I guess.
Obviously, as a game designer, that's kind of what I tend to do. I tend to look well past all the graphics and all the special effects and figure out, all right, what is the core system doing? And that's just the part where I thought the game was quite thoroughly uninteresting.
Somebody made Qbert. That's pretty funny, I guess.
I saw a lot of Pokemon.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
I saw new
My Little Pony.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of this kind of creature creation. So
Have any of you browsed Sporepedia or whatever, the online kind of database? And is that still going?
Yeah, it's still up.
So you can browse.
I heard it was down for a time, but they brought it back. I was kind of disappointed because, like I said, I've been playing since the beginning. Well, there's a long period where I wasn't playing, but a lot of my creations kept disappearing from the Sporepedia.
Oh no!
I would keep trying to re-upload them, which unfortunately meant I would have to create a new version, which is just basically edit it, change something meaningless like the description, and then re-upload it.
Yeah.
So I was doing that a lot, trying to re-upload stuff, and eventually, when I came back to it recently, I think I had 3 creations left in there. It was one spaceship, one creature, and one building. But the funny thing is, I still had, because they're very small, everything is basically metadata in an image file. So if you look at the actual creations, it looks like a PNG file that you can open up, and it's just an image of, static image of your creature. But within that is a very small, several kilobyte description of how it's made and stuff. So I had that all on my hard drive. So when I restarted playing it, even though I expected that all this stuff was gone forever, my creatures were still I don't know if they were re-downloaded from some invisible place, but a lot of my creatures came back, so I was just happy to see all of them again. They weren't gone forever.
So, am I correct in thinking they released a standalone version of the creature editor as a separate program?
They actually, not only was there a small demo, but they released a paid creature creator where all you could do is create creatures. It was $10.
I don't know if it was just for that version, but I seem to remember at some point seeing that they added support to export the things you created as a Collada file or a 3D model, effectively, where you could. That might be another way of kind of getting your creatures out and holding on to them.
Oh, that's interesting.
In a more future-proof way.
You can get 3D models printed of your creatures from somewhere. That's nice. I don't know if they still do that.
It's a cool touch.
I wanted to say that I think this was potentially, if this wasn't Will Wright's last game and it wasn't so criticized from players. I think this would have been, and they did kind of try to make it into a franchise. They did make mobile games that focused more on the creature type stage. There's one for the DS. They made a Wii type of game. They also made a PC game that's more of an adventure game called Spore that uses the creature creator again, and you're controlling that creature in like an adventure type of world where it's more, there's more stuff to do. So I think they did try to expand on some of the good ideas they had from this game and make it add more hardcore gameplay type stuff to it. But I guess some of that stuff really caught on. I do have Spore, but even I haven't played Spore that much, so but it does have pretty much the same type of character creator, and you add different parts for like weapons and stuff. But maybe next time I'll ask you to play Spore.
Is it just me, or like the character creator was my least favorite part of the game?
It's just you.
It seems to be just you.
Unanimously agreed by everyone else.
I just don't care about customizing the creature.
Do you want to do like final thoughts or anything? Or I don't know if anyone has any other pressing things to talk about. Does anyone have
I'll go last.
I have one last fun factoid of things I remember about Spore, which when I was asking about like crazy creatures and you were talking about like your glitched out paperclip character, it was funny that led into then bugs that really detracted from people's enjoyment, whereas that one seemed like just a funny one. But I was going to bring up, there was some discussion from people who worked on the character creator that they had this kind of philosophy of like, there are going to be ways to break this. Like, it's such a complex kind of thing. So they had this approach that they took of like, when it fails, try to make it fail funny, basically. So like, if you create a creature that's like totally pushing, a weird edge case that causes the creature to do like crazy things, as long as it's amusing and entertaining, then that's fine. Like, they weren't too worried about that. So I thought that was just a cool like approach to it. But then unfortunately, it's too bad that the game had some other technical failures. We're the opposite of funny, like losing your save game. That's not so.
That's a good mentality to have. But when you design it, it seems like a really positive way to see something that is potentially fatal to fail.
So,
I like playing games that are both creative and God mode type games, so I really enjoy playing this game, and I have tried playing harder modes or more aggressive style, like kill everything. But I tend to find that, to me, it's more fun to play the more happy, peaceful route where I'm trying to spread life through the galaxy rather than eliminate all my foes. So I enjoy that. For me, I like a more casual experience that's like less about the challenge of overcoming these difficulties and more like, can I make a really beautiful, nice place out of this chaos that I'm given? So like even just the prospect of creating, like spreading the life throughout my solar system was a pretty cool idea for me.
I found out about that save thing when my power went out.
oh yeah.
And I had to start over again. I think I was close to, or maybe in the tribal stage when it happened. But I made a cooler creature because of it.
And it sounds like you really enjoyed the game overall. Right?
Yeah, I like the game.
Yeah. So that's probably a testament to,
Yeah.
to the quality of it on some level, that like that can happen and you can still enjoy it overall.
I'll probably play it again sometime.
Did the game come out during that weird era when you're constantly like those games that you have to save versus now we have the autosave going on?
Yeah, it was
It
was amongst the transition era.
That's how I felt.
It's worth mentioning, like, at the time when consoles were more bigger than PC gaming, like they are today, console manufacturers actually had a limitation on how many times you can save. So that's why auto-saving was discouraged back then.
I think,
Nowadays, we save on hard drives, which is far more tolerable
Yes.
at that kind of errors.
yeah, I think the game itself may have even come on CDs, not DVDs. So, I think the game was developed to be very accessible in terms of computer hardware and stuff. Like, obviously, the creatures are very tiny. So, I mean, it seems like it was made to be the least very on. I mean, I play on max settings now, but it wasn't meant to like push the boundaries of computers. So maybe they just disabled the didn't add an autosave because it would have slowed down someone's computer. I don't know. It's possible.
Robert?
Well, okay. Well, one of the more interesting aspects of the game for me, aside from the first time I saw Epic running at me from the horizon, was due to a previous game. When I first started the game, I was a carnivore, and when I made it to the creature stage and I didn't want to attack any of the monsters, I found myself starving to death because I wasn't able to eat the fruit from the trees without barfing, and I didn't want to kill the monsters and eat them. And then I started doing some research online and I realized you can be an omnivore. So I restarted the game. And I played pretty much the same way. I created a purple monster, gave him the same monster type of name and description. There's slight changes in it. The first time around, because he was a carnivore, he ended up with a mouth that looked more like an alligator. Because the second time around, he was an omnivore, he ended up with a beak like a bird. Various physical changes. So I'm playing my second playthrough, and I run into my old version of myself.
Oh, interesting.
And it's like it felt to me like they came from the same place, and they just took two different evolutionary paths. And it was like, how some people might feel looking at a gorilla in a cage. It's like, oh, well, you're my ancestor, and I just ran up to this old version of myself, same name, just same kind of looks, but it was completely different. I was like, that is weird.
That's an interesting system there.
I'm a little embarrassed by some of my earlier creations, but they're out there. In my game, at least.
Those are the ones that stuck around. I don't know what order we're going in. If I could do some final thoughts.
I'm technically last.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that this game exists, and I'm really I think it's an awesome experiment, and just those types of examples and some of the stories people have told about like Alana, your story about the crazy paperclip character, and Robert, that story you told, that to me is one of the most exciting things about games is when games can generate these things that work very well as stories just from these weird sort of procedural interactions and stuff. So I think, there's a lot of that type of stuff that seems to arise with Spore that I think is really cool and really exciting. So I really like that aspect of it. And the thing that has stuck with me about it, and will continue to, is mostly just the user generated content side and the character creator, which I still think is just one of the most impressive examples of that type of putting a lot of customization in the player's hand, while trying to make it intuitive. So I'm continue to be really impressed by that. It's particularly, I guess, I have some weird personal feelings towards the way Spore was designed and its ultimate fate, as far as not being super commercially successful necessarily, because I worked on a game which had a very in-depth character customization thing, and that was a big focus of the development. It was an online shooter called All Points Bulletin. So that was also one of the best kind of character editors I've ever seen. But again, that, I always felt that part of it, I wasn't always sure how it would connect with the online shooter part. So it's you're kind of courting two different crowds at that point. So I always had mixed feelings about that, at the same time as I really admired all the work that went into the character creator for APB. And that's how I kind of feel about Spore as well. It's like, I'm super impressed with these particular parts of it. And as a whole, as an experiment, like all the things that it tried to do. And if you think about when it did it, like it was really on the forefront of like using procedural generated content in interesting ways, like this online asynchronous, like pulling in of other players' data and populating the world with it. Like there's so many daring things in there. And, you know, the fact that it maybe doesn't all cohere perfectly, I think that sometimes that's just the price that you pay. And I'm really sad that, you know, as you mentioned, Alana, if this is Will Wright's last game, if Maxis isn't around anymore, you know, I think that this is still a game that if I worked on it, I would look back on with pride for like all the things that the development team tried to do. So.
I'll start with the positives first. It's always a good idea to start there. I thought the music was really good. It's mostly just ambient sound effects, but the audio.
You can customize the music too.
Just a little bit. I genuinely thought that was really impressive. I think also it was a very technically impressive game. I threw a lot of things on it, like 7 pairs of legs, and it chugged along just fine. Granted, it didn't look well, but it chugged along, which is the important part. I've only managed to crash it once or twice, so that's also impressive on my book. And I do admit that the character creation stuff is pretty flexible. For what little time I spent, I was able to do whatever I felt like I wanted to do, and you know, that's good enough at that. It's kind of weird that I don't find the customization portion of the game to be interesting in the slightest, because like, you know, I spend a lot of time when starting like an MMORPG game. I actually care about what kind of character I created, yet specifically for Spore, I just didn't. So it might probably be a time issue, seeing that I don't play MMORPGs anymore, so who knows. I just thought the game was repetitive, under-ambitious. Like, people say it's over-ambitious. I thought it was under-ambitious. It didn't try hard enough. And, like, even when it comes to simplifying certain ideas, I thought that it did all of that very poorly. I thought certain parts was far too complex for its own good. And ironically, at the same time, I thought the complex parts were also the best part of the game. So, I don't know. It was just
You're on the science team.
Well, I mean, you know from the games that I make that I actually prefer simpler games, right? So I tend to be on the cute side of the team, and I would have completely agreed with Chris Hecker on that point. But even then, I felt like it was all of that was implemented very poorly. I should have mentioned the other positive. It's really a polished game. But the part that it wasn't polished in, to me, the core mechanics was just repetitive and uninteresting in the slightest. It's to me a very average game. It doesn't fall under the, oh, I hate this game so much kind of thing. Those are reserved for a special sorts of category of games, but nothing in Spore to me is particularly makes the experience particularly compelling, nor particularly, you know, nauseating. So I was just left with, it's a game.
It was like a full-scale WarioWare game. They took 5 different play styles, expanded on it, and then just made you go from one to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think maybe the core ideas of, you know, creation, and that was the precedent, and then the actual gameplay styles of what you do in each of those stages was probably less the reason for the game, I guess. So they're more generic. Like, they didn't really necessarily... I mean, they do sort of make sense, but at the same time, they're not like... It's not like when you think of Spore, you think about, like, this is a game about terraforming planets. It's really a game about creating stuff, and the different gameplay elements of, like, the civilization stages and stuff are just kind of just the minutiae, I guess. It's the gameplay kind of takes a backseat, I guess.
There's also the parts where you mentioned several of you have mentioned about how you're able to meet your past creatures, or like how you're able to meet with other creatures that your friends have created. And there was a moment where I thought that was interesting, and it lasted all of 5 minutes for me to get over with that as a feature. So I just didn't... to me, those kind of features I don't find compelling in the slightest, because they're just aesthetic changes.
I wouldn't find that overly compelling. I was just interested. Oh, hey, there was that thing that I created some time ago. I guess it appeared.
Well, I think that's awesome.
There we have it. Point and counterpoint.
I think there's, I mean, it's a shame it's not like the same persistent world. I think the fact that you kind of have to start over in a new world to see these things, it'd be cooler, I think, if the stuff that they could expand upon it. So either you're seeing somebody else's world as it actually is, or your old worlds as they actually were, rather than just sort of randomly dispersing stuff where it's needed. If there was sort of like the dwarf fortress aspect of you can go back and visit other civilizations that you've had, and it's actually the way it was, rather than like a mix of my creature with somebody else's buildings and somebody else's ship, and it's all kind of stuck together.
I wonder if we'll see that in No Man's Sky. That seems to be sort of the premise.
I feel like they tried to do some aspect of that with the newer SimCity as well, where they had more of like your neighbors, your friends could be like neighboring cities. And
you could be able to visit them, but it wasn't like necessarily a live version of the city. It was as it was when you entered the city, but it was mostly just about trading resources between the cities. I think, I'm not positive, because I know on the main galactic maps you have different planets you can start at, like different save files sort of. I'm not sure if what I'm describing is actually the way it is. I think if you start on a new planet, it's a completely separate galaxy, so that's kind of unfortunate. If it is the situation where you start on a new planet and you can actually visit your old planet, I think that would be cool, but as far as I understand it, I think they're all separate galaxies, which is kind of another missed opportunity. I don't know if anyone has any information if it is all one galaxy.
If true, as you can tell, I won't have cared.
I thought that would be the case though, because you start out.
Because the map is the starting point.
Right, yeah, and then you choose one of the several galaxies that you could start with, go into that. And I generally thought that you could be able to, if you created, say, 3 worlds, you would be able to visit at each and every one of them. I don't know.
I kind of thought that too, but I believe each save is its own unique galaxy, so I'm not sure. If I'm wrong about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I would love it if I could, like destroy my own save game or something. But
you would have to get into war with yourself then.
Yeah, I don't know if they would let you do that because you could potentially mess up the others, or you could game the system perhaps by trading with yourself.
Right.
Oh yeah, that was a weird game-breaking immersion moment for me. Did anyone else experience this? For some reason, once you reach the civilization stage, all the civilized cities is your creature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that made me go, wait, that's not what I expected.
Don't they kind of address that in the cutscene for that section? Where they say, like, you've conquered the planet, but your species no longer all speaks the same language or whatever, so they've separated into different cities.
Nope.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some text kind of trying to explain.
I don't remember this.
I think it's where they kind of, because they're trying to sort of follow the human path that we're on, whereas, I mean, they could have done the tribal stage similarly, where all the tribes were your same creature too.
There were also remnants of other tribes and creatures though. During the civilization stage, that you could sort of see, like, oh, there's this group of creatures on the edge of your city or something.
I guess that's kind of trying to represent the evolutionary idea, like whoever's the best kind of will succeed, and everything else just gets pushed down. Like you can't have everyone succeeding.
Yep.
But I don't know. It would have been. I do think it would have been interesting if the other cities were different creatures, but
Yeah.
Yeah, your feature does take over the whole planet. So
That's something to get stuck with.
yep. Well, next time we'll play
Hello, I'm Astra, your host for the next Game Club meeting. We will be playing a small indie game called To the Moon. To the Moon is a story-driven indie adventure RPG about two doctors traversing through memories of a dying man to fulfill his last wish. The game is made with RPG Maker XP Engine, and considering that it is a narrative-focused game, I would advise to not read up anything regarding the story. I will see you soon. Fly me to the... Wait, what? Wrong song? Never mind.